You know, for us who are blue and we are Azimio, last year at a time like this, we would not sit together. And when the election ended, we spoke today about reconciliation. Some of us chose the path to reconciliation, to consider Kenya first, and we believe that Kenya is bigger than any one of us. And so, Your Excellency, myself, and the team from Jubilee, members of parliament, we all went to the mantra, asiyekubali kushindwa, sio mshindani. And I know majority of Kenyans, maybe there are some who never voted, others voted for Azimio, others voted for Kenya Kwanza. Elections will be in the next 5 years. My appeal to all of us is that Kenya is greater than all of us, that we should work together to make sure that Kenya works. If Kenya burns, all of us burns. I want to urge the people from my side who, some of them chose also not to come for this prayer breakfast, that it is important that we accept the will of God. It is us who handed over the power, and so it is necessary that we support the government of the day, not for ourselves, but for the betterment of Kenya. And so, on the same tone of reconciliation, I pray to my colleagues in parliament that they also reconcile with me, because the best thing I did was not to run away from them, but just think bigger picture about Kenya. And so, Mr. Speaker, as they plan to remove me as a deputy minority whip, I hope that you'll also look at me with a better eye, and I also extend the same branch to my colleagues in Azimio, because there's nothing wrong I've done. The only thing I've done is to think about Kenya first and not myself. And hopefully that Kenya is going to rise. There are many challenges. Your Excellency, what I can promise you is that we will not wait to see Kenya go down, but each one of us will try our best to contribute in the little way we can be able to do to make Kenya better and to make life.
I really want to thank God this morning because of this prayer breakfast. It really encourages me that the country Kenya, the people of Kenya, are people that wait upon the Lord. I really want to thank God more so because it is our leaders that have organized this prayer breakfast. Congratulations to Parliament and to all the leaders for doing this, because when our leaders are praying, then we know that Kenya is safe and even Africa is safe. Because we know that when new leaders pray, it doesn't matter the differences that you may have, even politically, because when you pray, God answers and God brings you together. And so let's continue praying for our nation, and let's continue reconciling the people of Kenya, because together we are stronger. Thank you. May the Lord bless you.
As we gather today, we desire reconciliation. This country belongs to us. We are commanded by our God that if you don't forgive one another, even the Father in heaven will not forgive you. And therefore, let us learn to forgive one another. Let us learn to speak one language, in one accent, and be in one accord, so that the vulnerables who are in this nation can start to see us and to experience the grace of God through us. Because it is only when we are in one accord that God works. Because the Lord says, you pray without ceasing, being thankful for one another, praying for one another. There is no greater thing than to be united. In Genesis 11, verse 6, it says that there were these people who built a tower, and they were united. They spoke one language. They were speaking in one accent. And it made God to come down from heaven, because whatever they had decided to do would succeed, but they were doing it for the wrong thing. But if they were doing it for the right thing, then nothing would be impossible for them.
Mr. President and fellow parliamentarians, you and I grow old when we give up on the most essential responsibility that sits on our shoulder. We are not here to aggrandize or empower ourselves. We are here to serve those who look to us to give them the shine of life. A man passed his 100th birthday just a week ago too. The older of you in the room will remember Henry Kissinger. He's turned 100 years, and in his 100th year, this American political leader signed the first copy of his book, Henry Kissinger's Leadership, 6 Studies in World Strategy. In the heart of the book, he adds a critical perspective as to what makes for effective, good leaders who lead nations like prophets, he says. He said this: leaders need to see less from the perspective of the possible than from a vision of the imperative. Let me translate that for you. Less from the ambitions set out in their manifestos, but more from the imperative that faces us. The global order, said Kissinger, the global order is being shaken by unrivaled regions of conflict, intensified antagonism between powers with conflicting claims of legitimacy. The only way, he says, for a future to emerge is that we put aside our divisions and we do relentless diplomacy. You'll know as well as I do that nations are lining up at the moment as to whether they do or do not support centers of conflict. We don't need to name them. We know them. They're all over our news channels. We watch them with grief and we feel the agony of lives destroyed. Well, it wasn't that long ago, 1955, when 29 nations gathered in Indonesia. Those 29 nations included many of Africa's countries, many emerging into new democracies. And at those 29 nations, there was a great debate as to whether or not Africa's countries face east or west. To whom do you look as the future emerges? Well, probably the smartest voice that was found to be gathered at that time was Kwame Nkrumah, soon to be Prime Minister of Ghana. And he rallied all of those present with the slogan, neither east nor west, we face forward. Neither east nor west, we face forward. For all of us, the big challenge of the facing forward future is the final F, forgiveness. Forgiveness. Because we cannot face forward if we do not forgive that which has transpired from the past. Forgiveness doesn't mean that the other person is right. But forgiveness liberates us. Forgiving other people is one of the greatest proofs of love. It's wiser to forgive and forget than it is to hate and remember. The practice of forgiveness is our most important contribution to the healing of relationships and to the healing and liberation of mankind. And Mark Twain, the clever writer, said this: forgiveness is the fragrance the violet sheds on the heels that has crushed it. Forgiveness is when I let you stand up, irrespective of the wrong, and still look you in the eyes with I say I need you. Because freedom only comes when forgiveness is birthed anew. I read a terrible story the other day called The Second Vulture. Some of you will remember the awful tragedy, not just of the fight in Sudan now, but the 93-94 famine. At that time, Kevin Carter, a South African photojournalist, a Pulitzer Prize winner for his journalism and his photography, took what was called the amazing shot. Some of you will recall this image of a tiny little girl, absolutely emaciated from lack of food and lack of water, her body bursting with her bones, desperate and broken, kneeling crushed, trying to get to a feeding center, and all alone. Behind her, a huge vulture, waiting with its gnashing claws and its huge beak, about to claw her to pieces in order to eat what remains of her life. Kevin Carter took the picture. As he took the picture, he rushed away. "I had a flight to catch," he said. He appeared on a radio program, savoring his great feat, thinking that he'd made such an exceptional photographic moment. He only lived sadly for another few months. For Kevin Carter took his life. He became depressed and committed suicide. His depression started deeply when he went on a radio program and he was asked this question: "Why did you not pick up the little girl who was dying before you and take her to safety?" His answer was, "I didn't wait to find out what happened after the shot. I had a flight to catch." And the caller replied, "I put it to you, Mr. Carter, that there were 2 vultures on that day, and one had a camera." How easy it is for you and I to observe the tragedies we witness, to simply see them as the events of others' responsibility, to determine that actually, as we live, we didn't do it, so we're not responsible. But I have news for you too. You and I are responsible. We are responsible for those who suffer and struggle, who cannot find their way to freedom, because we may be holding back that critical key of forgiveness and renewal. For he who threw the stars into the skies and pleaded with his Father before he returned again that we would be one, reconciled to one another, in forgiveness, facing those we perceive to be our enemies, willing to put aside what we think of as our positions, laying down as he did the grandeur of our estate, and facing those we utterly dislike for the sake of our people, for the sake of our communities, for the sake of our nations, for the sake of our world, gathering together so that we may make peace a chance.